I will not prolong it. Reverend Voyle is an Episcopal priest, and he's been engaged in the appreciative way for some time. I could tell you a lot about him, but he is of age. Amen. And he can't speak for himself. So without further ado, let me present to you Reverend Dr. Rob Voyle.
Good morning. Good morning. It's good to be here amongst you. Gathered with a few of you last night. Really cool. So I got a little exercise for you just to get you to be thinking about things, and we'll get into the whole appreciative inquiry. But I want you to take a moment and think of somebody that you love, who also loves you, because it works better that way. So, got someone in mind? Think of that person that you love and who loves you. And as you think about that person, remember, and that word remember, we're going to spend a lot of time playing around with that word the next few days, because it means remember or put back together. So put back together that person in your mind. So remember a time when you got to share love with that person, they shared love with you, and so you were... And you remember that time. And as you remember that time, just be aware of how valuable to you that love is. And it wouldn't be a good thing to lose, would it? So in your mind, hold on to that love. And just notice what it's like to hold on to love. Okay, now just set that aside. So where are you all from?
Everywhere.
Everywhere, all over the United States? Anyone from Canada? Or just the United States? Uh-huh.
Jamaica.
Jamaica?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. So did you come the furthest to get here?
Well, I've been here for a while.
You've been here for a while. Okay. Now all of that was just to distract you. I want you to come back to the person that you love. Notice in the English language we say that we are in love, which means that somehow we are in this container called love. So this time, as you think about the person, rather than holding on to the love, take a moment and let the love hold on to you and the other person. And notice the difference. What's it like to be held by love? And as you think of being held by love, you can contrast it with holding on to love. And so the question I have for you, is there any difference? The first question is there a difference between holding on to love and being held by love? There is a difference. I noticed you had there was a big change, isn't there? So what is so the next question is, what is the difference?
Love holds stronger, a little tighter than
Uh-huh. Okay, so love is stronger. Okay. What else did you notice?
And bigger.
And bigger.
But love does the work.
Love does the work, so it's effortless. Uh-huh. So it's a whole lot less effort putting into it. Okay. What else? Did anyone feel bigger? Sort of light? Uh-huh. Now, actually, the first one I don't think is love at all. I think it's fear. Because because it's all based on you're afraid of losing, so you're holding on tight. And it's actually holding on to love. Out of that, it's fear-based, and we get jealousy and greed and all of those other things that we are really problematic in our life. And so I would say that the task in life is to allow ourselves to be held by love rather than holding on to love. And so I think of my beloved Kim. She's back in Portland. Actually, today is our 30th wedding anniversary. So, when I think of her, she's always here in my mind. And she and I can be held by love today. And so we have that expression, we are in love. It's not that I love her and she loves me, but somehow together we find ourselves in this reality called love. So first thing to come back to as we go through this course of this week, what I invite you to do is to simply let yourself be held by love. And just every now and then, just remember to allow yourself to be held by love. And what I'm going to say is this whole appreciative inquiry thing that we're talking about, it really is, if you like, the skills and tools and techniques to allow yourself to do two things: to be held by love, and then to see the world through the eyes of love. Does that sound like a plan?
Yes.
Now, if that all doesn't interest you, maybe you could talk to Dr. Roberson and we can figure out a way to let you off for the next 3 days. But that's what I'm really interested in, helping people live in love, staying in love, and seeing particularly with the eyes of love. A good friend of mine, Ron English, who was actually ordained by Dr. King at Ebenezer Church in Atlanta. And his mission in life is to help communities discover what love is calling them to do. And, we go through life in the church, what is God calling us to do? What is God calling us to do? And sometimes that language just sort of we get jaded. Yeah. We like a little bit of novelty. And to stop and ponder, what's love calling us to do? And then I would sit with, like if you were talking with your church board, for example, what's God calling you to do? You've got this situation, this problem or something. What's God calling us to do? What's love calling us to do? Now, if your answer isn't the same, which are you going to change? Your definition of God or your definition of love? Do we need to do some theology here? I'd also say, though, what we also need to probably ask the question is, what is fear calling us to do? What is guilt calling us to do? And then to come back and think, aha, so what we really need to be paying attention to is, what is love calling us to do? What is God calling us to do? The God who is love. Okay. So that's what we're going to be about the next. You thought we were going to talk about appreciative inquiry. I'm really interested in helping you to discover the eyes of love and to live and share those eyes with the world. Take a moment and just let yourself be held by love. Okay, now I want to just say a few words about who I am, what I'm doing, and how I got to be kind of doing what I'm doing. And particularly in terms of this whole thing about appreciative inquiry. I was born and raised in New Zealand. That's why I speak funny. Unlike some of you, I really am from the deep south. Exactly, the real south. Okay, so, and I was ordained in New Zealand and was as an Anglican priest, or in the States, same thing as an Episcopal priest. So I came to the States to do some training. But I'll tell you the honest truth, I came to the States because I was as miserable as sin. I was really, really miserable in a dark place. And here's the crazy thing. Every counselor, every therapist, every pastor I spoke to, you know what they wanted to know? Why is Rob miserable? And you know what that got me? A better informed misery. I discovered I had wonderful reasons to be miserable. I had lots of reasons to be miserable. So I had a better informed misery. I was still miserable. Until a CPE supervisor. And I'd done quite a bit of CPE, and most of the CPE supervisors were really interested in trying to figure out why is Rob miserable. Except my last one, he just wasn't interested in my misery. Totally uninterested in my misery. He only had one question. Anyone got an idea what it might be? What?
How are you going to get rid of it?
No, he wasn't even interested. He was so uninterested in my misery, he wasn't even interested in getting rid of it.
What makes you happy?
Bingo. He only wanted to know, how does Rob do happy?
Amen.
And what you'll discover is that happiness is not the absence of misery. And so began to get me on a journey. And I ended up doing a master's in family therapy as part of my studies. And what was interesting is the whole program that I was involved in was based on the work of a guy called Milton Erickson. Now, not Eric Erickson, the developmental psychologist, but Milton Erickson. Does anyone know that name? Lived in Arizona. Anyone know Milton? Now, he had a very, very different way of working with people. In fact, he wasn't related to the church or anything. He was a secular therapist. He died in about 80 or 81, lived in Arizona in the latter part of his life. But he would do kind of crazy stuff with his patients. And it was actually through him that I finally figured out a lot of what Jesus was doing when Jesus was doing crazy stuff with people. And we're going to look at big time at that tomorrow morning, trying to understand some of the healing strategies and processes of Jesus. But here's an example of a guy. One of his students was a guy called Jay Haley. And this is an example of him, Jay Haley, working with a young boy. Is brought to him, he's probably 7, 8, 6, I don't know, something, just a young boy who was afraid of dogs. And his family found that was a problem. So they brought this little boy to the doctor, to Jay Haley, who was a therapist, and said, Johnny's afraid of dogs. Haley looked at the kid and said, I understand you're afraid of dogs. Oh yeah, they're scary. He says, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go down to the pound, and you won't have to be afraid, because all the dogs will be in cages, and I'll be with you, so the dogs won't be able to hurt you. But we're going to walk around the pound, and your job is to, what your job's going to be is to find the most frightened puppy in the pound. And you're going to take the puppy home and teach the puppy not to be afraid. End of therapy. That's all it was. Notice that at no time did he say, now Johnny, tell me, how long have you been afraid of dogs? When did you learn to be afraid of dogs? Who's to blame for you being afraid of dogs? And how is being afraid of dogs messing up your life? If you tell me all of that stuff, I'll help you not be afraid. None of that. There's simply a problem and a solution and a goal, and in between is a strategy. Right? And that strategy in Haley's type of therapy was called strategic family therapy. Now, at the same time in the church got into family systems theory. Now it's kind of interesting because that whole, firstly, just take systems theory. There are a whole lot more kinds of systems in the world than simply family. There's learning systems, there are business systems, industrial systems, all sorts of kinds of systems. They're just simply family systems. So the church got a very, very narrow slice of systems theory. Now the next thing is, they got a very, very small slice of family systems theory, because they got Murray Bowen. Now for whatever reason, it was probably totally personal than any kind of academic rigor or anything. For whatever reason, when we were studying family therapy, I didn't like Bowen. I like
you say that again, you didn't like what?
Bowen's family theory, which is family systems in the church. Friedman's, that whole approach was based on Murray Bowen's work. And that, for whatever reason, and I don't even know the real reason, what I was really fascinated by was people like Virginia Satir, Jay Haley, Watzlawick, and Milton Erickson, all of these other guys, who had very, very different ways of working with families. But those folks basically, do you know any of those names? Because most of you probably haven't heard of them, and you will have got this. So you've got a very narrow, if you've got any family theory, it's going to be a very, very narrow slice. And I got so tired and frustrated going to these church conferences, sitting around with my fellow clergy, and everyone was trying to out-dysfunction the next. Well, you think you've got it bad in your parish, mate? Boy, I'll tell you what, my church is more dysfunctional than yours. And then the other two of your wusses, you want to see some dysfunction, come on down to my parish. It was like really Freudian, whose is bigger than whose, just really crazy. And I got so tired of that, and this whole pathological focus. We sang a song just before about Jesus is my everything, right? And the church was considered the bride of Christ. I told you about my bride, right? Now, if anyone called her codependent, dysfunctional, toxic, or any of those things, we would be going out to the woodshed to have some serious prayer, right?
Amen.
So, here we have Jesus' bride is being called toxic, codependent, dysfunctional.
Yeah.
It's not right. And I was so tired of that. I was screaming at God and the universe, I want to know how to do Erickson with a congregation. And I went to this big international Erickson convention, and a guy was talking about doing Erickson with organizations. And what he was actually talking about was appreciative inquiry. And it just transformed a whole bunch of the way I look at things. And it came out of the secular world. David Cooperwriter's work at Case Western, and I found it, and a few other people did it, and I basically spent since about 2000 teaching the world, teaching the church particularly, how to think appreciatively.
Amen.
And he would be the simplest way of understanding it. Think about Jesus. What did Jesus come for? Did Jesus come to give us less death? He come to give us life, right? So abundant that we would just freely give it away to others. He came to give us life, and yet virtually all of our programs in the church and in society are about having less of what we don't want. See, I wanted to be less miserable. Even if all those therapists and what have you had been brilliant, what would I still be at the end of the day? Miserable. And so we focus on having less of what we don't want. Here'd be another question. Did Did Jesus come to stop us sinning? Or did Jesus come to help us love? To set us free, to grow in love. And yet what do half the time in the church is all we focus on is trying to get you to stop sinning. And so we become experts at sin. Better informed sinners. And what we need to be doing is growing in our capacity to love. So I have an amen for love?
Yes, amen.
That's what we're going to work on. That's what I'm basically thinking appreciative inquiry is about. It's helping us to grow in love. Here's what I know about me and what I know about all of you. In each one of us, good exists and bad exists. Our task in life is to call forth the good from one another. And if we continue to do that, it'll have to be at the expense of the bad. And it's not simply to ignore the bad. There are times when we've got to focus on some of that. But I would say the biggest thing to help you dealing with the bad is to grow the good. Right? That's what we're going to learn in the next couple of days. That's my plan. Cool. Okay, so I got a little exercise for you. I've told you a whole bunch about myself. But I want to get you to just talk to the people sitting behind you, in front of you, next to you, just for a couple of minutes. I've got a question, basically, to answer these couple of questions. Just who are you and where you're from. You may already know that about, but here's the question I really want you to focus on. Beyond being with your family, what do you love to do? And I'll tell you what I mean by that. Well, I'll share some of the things that I love to do. Clearly what I love to do is what I'm doing right now. And so thanks to Dr. Robertson and to you all for letting me have this opportunity to do what I love to do, teaching people about this appreciative way. But other things that I love to do, I love woodworking. I live way out in the forest and I love to drive my little tractor, move dirt. And the other thing I love to do is glue big pieces of pipe together. Seriously. Yeah. That is some real cool pleasure, to glue big pieces of pipe together. Now what I'm going to want you to think about, what in your life do you do? Some of the simple kinds of things you do in your life that just bring you a burst of satisfaction way down here that is out of proportion. You know, other people don't get excited about gluing big pieces of pipe together. What? Is there anyone in the room who gets excited about gluing big pieces of pipe together?
I can tell you, you're the only one.
All right, but for some reason that, and I'll tell you why in a bit, but I will come back to that. But so I want you to think about those things as simple things that give you a lot of deep, deep satisfaction, like when you get in your zone. And it may be as simple as something like gluing big pieces of pipe together. All right. Okay, so here's the thing. What did you... Well, actually, no. A couple of things. Let me back up. How many of you had the experience, you think of one thing you love to do, and before you know it, another thing comes into your mind, another thing, and another thing, and another thing. Now, I call that a cascade of sort of brain thing. Here's a metaphor for what we've done. We've opened in your mind like the filing cabinet drawer of things that you love. And once you pull one thing out, there's other things coming. They're all connected. We don't store stuff in our mind in some kind of crazy fashion. It's all interlinked. And so what we've done is open this big filing cabinet drawer of things that you love. And I was really cunning. The reason I did that at the very beginning is because we're going to put appreciative inquiry into that drawer, so that you love appreciative inquiry. Now, see, I could ask you, what do you hate about the church? And then teach you about appreciative inquiry, and you'd put appreciative inquiry in the drawer of things you hate about the church. That wouldn't be smart, would it? But come back to this. So that experience that you had of one thing leading to another thing, leading to another thing, part of the reason for that, that's actually your first experience of appreciative inquiry. That's what I'm looking for in terms of when I work with people, is to get them into this mindset of the things that they love. There are all sorts of reasons for doing it. I'm going to go through some of them. The first reason is, how many of you are having a positive emotion as you think about the things that you love to do? Yes. You've got a positive. Anyone not got a positive emotion? Yeah. Sometimes people, they get sad because they're not doing what they love to do. But most people have a positive emotion as they remember, right? Now, positive emotion, and Barbara Fredrickson is the person who did this research. Here's a way you can kind of do the research, is you put a little wristwatch on a person that's an alarm, and every 20 minutes the alarm goes off, goes beep beep, and you write down in the journal whether you're having a positive or negative emotion. Regardless, it doesn't matter why, are you having a positive or a negative emotion? Now what the research shows, that if that ratio over the course of the day of positive to negative emotions goes over 2.9 to 1, your brain goes into a sort of neurological state she calls broadening, and all sorts of incredible things begin to happen. The first thing is, you'll become more creative and be able to think outside of the box. Now the research also goes on to show that when you're in this state, you'll be more resilient to stress, you will be more racially tolerant, and somebody else's research shows that your intuition is more likely to be accurate. Now that last one is kind of interesting because, let me just say, and if it goes below 2.9 to 1, all of the opposite is likely to happen. You won't be able to think outside of the funk that you're in. I call that a funky brain state. And when you're in that funk, you can't think outside of it. Have you ever had like a teenager come home from school? Well, one day they're happy doing something at home and just loving it and what have you. They go to school, something happens, they come home and they're in a funk, right? And you try to get them out of the funk. You say, why don't you go and do what you're doing? I don't want to do it! And everything you suggest makes it worse, right? Yes. You know that phenomenon? That's because when you're in a funk, you can't think outside of it. Wow. And when you're in that state, you're also, so you aren't able to think creatively, you're going to be more likely to be racially intolerant. Yeah, it has some serious implications for us as a country.
Wow. Explains that.
You have ruined my whole day mentioning that name. We ain't going to talk about that anymore. Think of some good things. Okay, got myself back into my positive emotional state. Okay, I'm back being creative and my anniversary. Oh, brilliant. Okay, I love it. And you do that again, I'm going to make you sit in the back. Okay. So,
when you encounter someone and you know they're in that funk, and you catch yourself trying to give positive suggestions, but they're sending them back, do you just be patient? What do you do?
I think you can do several things. One of them, the first thing you want to do is put 1 foot into their world. Not 2 feet in their world, because then you'll go down with it. You put one thing and think, wow, you're really having a funky day today, aren't you? And life really sucks. And you're not thinking anything. And you could even exaggerate a little bit. But once you get a head nod, they know that you're miserable. And they know that you know. Right? So you've connected with them. You've got empathy. The thing is, don't drill down on the funk anymore. You want to you got 1 foot in their world. Now you want to put a foot in the other world. And you want to say to them, so I'm just curious, what would be helpful to you right now? do you just want to sit and be a little funky? Because, sometimes that's, I mean, if you're going to drag them to Happy Land and they're not ready to go, it really will be a drag.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we don't want to do that, but it could be, or even to ask them, is there something I could do to help? Get permission. Thomas Hoare, who was a guy who lived in New York, died a few years back, he used to say unsolicited solicitude is trespass.
Wow.
Now, and here's the thing, how many of you have had the experience you walk away from somebody who's just basically told you to get lost and you're going, I was only trying to help. And that's because you didn't have permission.
No.
And so I would say you're feeling pretty miserable. Would you like me to help you with that, or is there something I can do to help? And if they say, no, I just want to stay here, so okay, I'll leave you. But if they do say, yeah. Now, we'll come back to a whole series of different strategies, what you can do there. But one of them may be to come back to this idea of what they love to do. And to be thinking about some of those things about what they love to do, because that's, we'll see there's a whole lot more to unwrap here. So, now here's the other thing about when you're down in that funky place, your intuition's not likely to be accurate. Now here's the thing, you see. Now if you're in a congregation that's in a lot of, if the whole congregation's in a funk, and so what they do, they get really funky, they'll fire the minister. Right? Then they'll sit around and think about, we need a new minister. And so, who gets to choose the new minister? Funky brain. And his thing is, every decision you make about the future, since the future hasn't happened, it's going to be an act of intuition. Now, some of you in this room, probably most of you in this room, love and actually have pretty good intuition, and you love to use your intuition in terms of making decisions about the future. I don't happen to be one of those. This is probably sacrilege to many of you, but I don't trust my intuition. And part of that, I didn't tell you, part of the story is, before I went to seminary, I was a mechanical engineer. I really am an old engineer. I trust what I can hold in my hand and cut with a saw and weld together, and it's like, so my intuition, I really haven't learned to trust it. Often because it's been wildly inaccurate. Now that could be because I'm in a funk a lot of the time, I don't know. But, so I make little intuitive hops when it comes to the future. I don't make big jumps. So if your congregation is in a funk and you're trying to make a big decision about the future, you're going to probably make an inaccurate decision. Now think about this. Go back to just after 9/11, when the United States got themselves into a funk, when we all as a world got into a funk, we made, and I say we because we're all in this, it's not just some people, it's we as a nation did some really funky things that we still haven't got out of, and we are reaping the benefits. So funky brain's not a good place to be if you're trying to discern the mind of God. You'll discern the mind of funk, but you won't discern the mind of God if you're in funky brain. Right? But you got to be careful. So we need to help people move into a positive mindset before they start making those big decisions. So, and this would be a strategy, sir, that you can use. So, we'll do this one in the privacy of your own minds. Think of something that you don't like about yourself. Something that you don't like about yourself. Something that you'd be really glad if you could get rid of. And as you think about that thing that you don't like about yourself, just think of all the ways you've tried to get rid of it. And as you think about all the ways you've tried to get rid of it, just be aware you failed, because you still have this thing you don't like about yourself, right? So not only do you have this thing you don't like about yourself, but you're also a miserable failure at getting rid of it. Okay? How many of you have got a positive emotional experience now, or have I just installed funky brain? But see, this is where people come for help. Why do people come to you for help? Because they have tried to fix a problem and it hasn't worked, and so they have failed to get rid of this problem. Now they've come to you, right? And they're in funky brain. And so they're in this very uncreative place. They come for help. So we need some strategies to move them from that place. So here would be one. It's called the miracle question from solution-focused therapy. And the miracle question goes like this, and get yourself to imagine this in relationship to this problem. Imagine tonight a miracle occurs and you wake up tomorrow and the problem is gone. You've forgotten to remember that you used to have a problem. All right? So you wake up, this miracle has occurred. Two questions actually. What's the first thing you notice that indicates you don't have the problem?
Feel better.
You feel better? And the next question would be, what do you begin to do now that you don't have this problem? So I'll let you just do this in the privacy in your own mind. Just imagine doing what you would be doing because you don't have the problem. Make a little movie in your mind with you as the lead character in the movie. Now, just be aware as you're imagining doing what you'd be doing, what your emotion is. Is it positive or negative? Positive. So just in one little activity, if the person's willing to go down the road, that's one way to actually, now we've got you in creative mind, creative brain, we can begin to, so what do you need in order to be able to do this? Now here's the other thing that's really fascinating. How many of you were aware, and not everybody will be in this category, but some of you probably will, is that what you would be doing and the problem are actually unrelated? Did anyone have that experience? That what they would be, so what you would be doing if you didn't have the problem is actually unrelated to the problem. And so we can actually get you on. We don't have to go mining. That's why I say only put one foot in the problem. We don't need to go mining into it. If we have a clear idea of where you want to go, it's the question is what do you need in order to get there? Yeah, it's kind of like when I was doing psychotherapy, for example, if someone came in depressed, and I said to them, so if you weren't depressed, what would you do tomorrow? And he says, well, I'd take my grandson to the beach. Well, frankly, I don't care whether you're depressed or not. We're going to spend the rest of the session working on what do you need in order to take your grandson to the beach. Because I'm pretty sure that if he took his grandson to the beach, he wouldn't be depressed. And that actually the depression and the whole thing probably is unrelated. So that would be one way of moving people into that positive emotional space. And a big part of this appreciative way is really about imaging the future. A future you would prefer to live in, and then figuring out what resources you need in order to live into that. So there's another big reason though, in terms of, it's not just about getting people to have happy emotions. There's another big reason to ponder this thing that you love to do. And that what I've discovered is these simple things that you love to do are actually literally true or metaphorically true of why you're on the face of the earth.
Say that again.
that what you love to do is either literally or metaphorically true of what you love to do, of why you're on the face of it. Now, for example, can any of you remember asking to be born? Anyone remember asking to be born? All I know, I was pretty young at the time. Right? And it was a pretty miserable experience because I refused to talk to my mother for the next 3 years. I did get over that, though. Right? I didn't ask to be born. Tells me I must be somebody else's idea. So whose idea was I? Well, my mother and father's idea, but whose idea were they? And whose idea were they?
Right.
And at some point we say we're God's idea, right?
Yeah.
So what was God up to when God had this idea of Rob? What did God have in his mind when God thought of you? So, the answer to that can be found quite simply in these things that you love to do. So what are some of the things that you heard, not what you love to do, but that you heard people say that they love to do? What did you hear when we did that little exercise? Movies. Going to the movies. Fishing. Where's the fisherman?
Right here. Right here.
We've got several people. You're the fisherman. You like to fish too?
Imagining.
Sit
And love sitting and imagining a reality.
Creation. In the back there, sir.
Scuba diving.
Scuba diving. Cool.
Walking barefoot. Yeah, walking barefoot.
Walking barefoot. Which is different than walking with shoes on, right?
Yeah.
Going to the spa. Shopping. Singing. Driving. Cool. Travel photography. Wow, cool.
Walking in the rain.
And I was just traveling.
Just traveling.
Meeting other people.
Meeting other people.
Making jewelry.
Making jewelry.
Picking the right wine to go with the right meal.
Okay, we're collecting vinyl records down here and
Picking the right wine for the right meal.
can I come to your place with him tonight? Now, here's the cool thing. Now, this is how this works, and I want you to ponder this. Think about this. How many people love to cook? Brilliant. How many people love to eat? Okay, work it out. Okay, I want to come back, though, to the people who love to cook. This becomes really important. And what I'm going to invite you to do is to sort of think through what cooking metaphorically represents to you. I'm going to go through some of the examples of what cooking is about. For example, I want you to, people who love to cook, go back and remember a time when you were really cooking. Now, as you're thinking about cooking, and a time when you were cooking that remember, some of you will be seeing cooking as an act of creativity. And what you're thinking about, if I put this meat with this sauce and this, and I got these other vegetables, and you're sort of, it's an act of creativity, but you're even imagining what it will taste like and smell like, and you've got all this sort of creativity in the olfactory and gustatory senses, right? Now, some of you, though, go, yeah, that's kind of important, but actually what's even more important in some ways is what the meal looks like. I'm getting a few nods and murmurs, and so, okay, so I pay attention to the colour, and I want to make it, I don't want to just slop it on the plate. It has to be arranged elegantly on the plate, and not only the plate, but the table has to look good. Maybe a candle, and so that actually before it appeals to the stomach, it's got to appeal to the eyes. So it's an act of visual creativity. It's almost like painting in a sense, right? Others of you say, yeah, that's kind of important, but also I pay actually the little piece of it that is really important to me actually is texture. I've got to have a little bit of crunch. I've got to have a little bit of soft. I've got to put it. It's got to be three-dimensional on the plate. It just can't be like soup, just all sort of flat. It's got to have sort of texture and what have you. And so that's a different way of thinking about creativity, right? And some of you are going, I don't know what this guy's talking about, but he hasn't mentioned anything. When I think about cooking, I'm not thinking about creativity and taste, and as I'm chopping the onions and all this kind of stuff, what I'm thinking about is who's going to eat it and what kind of conversations we're going to have together. And that cooking, instead of an act of creativity, yeah, it's kind of important, it's actually an act of hospitality. And it may not be, it's not an either or, but what I want you to pay attention to is to what is the sort of all the stuff, say, for cooking, what's the thing that is most important to you. And here's what I would say, that's probably the essence of it, and if you really love cooking, and that's when you get that blast of satisfaction down here, right? When you get that kind of feeling, that's why you're on the face of the earth. Now, think about it. Let's go back and think. Most of you are preachers, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're preachers. If any of you have trouble writing sermons and you love to cook, stop writing them, start cooking them.
That's real.
Now, for some of you who are into hospitality, think about when you're preaching and you're really in your zone and what you are doing is making this gospel hospitable. And you're expressing the hospitality of God. And what is the great expression of the hospitality of God? Love. It's Jesus, right? Jesus is the sign that God is hospitable. Right?
Yeah.
You helping me.
That's what I'm here for. Cool. Now, so let's think about it. I worked with she was a United Church of Canada minister. Her name's Minnie, and she lets me use her name. A few years, when I first met her, she hadn't been ordained for very long, and she was really, really frustrated because she was having trouble writing her sermons. And they wouldn't get done till often between the two services on Sunday morning. It's that experience, it just doesn't come. And it's kind of crazy because, you get taught how you got to write a sermon and how you, like on Tuesday morning, you get your lections out and you go through all of that kind of stuff and you figure out, you do your Bible study, then you're supposed to put some themes together and all that kind of stuff. And she was taught how to write a sermon. And it wasn't happening as the book said it was supposed to. Now here's an interesting thing. She's a delightful lady. And what Minnie loves to do is quilt. And I was sitting with her and I said, so Minnie, tell me, when you're making a quilt, what do you do when the pieces of fabric and the pattern and the colour just don't seem to be working? And she says, I just set it aside and go about the rest of my day, and when I come back to it, it all seems to work. And for once in my life, I just shut up and didn't say anything. In about 20 seconds of silence, she goes, and I looked her in the eye and said, Minnie, here's the deal. Stop writing your sermons and start quilting them. Now, I have no idea how to quilt a sermon, but at the very depths of her being, she does. And I got an email from her last year. It was about 10 or 12 years later. And she says, I'm still quilting my sermons. Now, here's the deal, though. I do know how to glue a sermon together. Seriously. So go back and think about some of these things you do in ministry. Think about what you love to do. And think about how you can take. Some of you are highly creative in one arena. And you need to take that creativity and bring it into some of these tasks that you do on a daily basis. Some of you, I can think, for example, of a pastor that I work with who was also, she had a part-time gig in a church, but she was also a municipal judge who was working in family law. And she loved to cook. And she's doing custody cases and those kinds of things in the family court. And I said to her, what's it like to cook up justice for children in a distressed marriage? And her whole face just glowed. When you think about what a judge has to do, you know, a lot of law, there's a rule. You got to do this, you got to do that, and all that kind of stuff, and backwards and forwards, right? But in a lot of family law, that's kind of the wisdom of Solomon. Which kid has to go with which parent and those kinds of stuff. She knows how to cook up justice for children in a distressed relationship. So come back to those things you love to do. Ponder a few other things. So where are my fishermen? There's one over here, two over here, and there was another fisherman somewhere. Okay, so we just got, so your name, sir?
Carl.
Carl. And your name, sir? Anthony. Carl and Anthony. You love to fish. Huh? What kind of fishing?
I like fishing for poker spots. So, like not deep water.
Not deep water. So you go offshore to do. Okay, so you get in a boat and go offshore, or do you stand on the shore and cast?
I don't like.
You got to get on a boat.
I gotta get on a boat.
Okay. How about you, Carl?
Pylon fishing.
Pylon fishing.
Along the poles of the bridge.
Oh, okay.
Bridge.
So freshwater fishing.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Take a moment and remember a time when you were really fishing, just having the time of your life, when you were in your zone, just saying, whoa, this is seriously cool. You got that in mind? Now, here's the deal, Carl and Anthony. Imagine this guy Jesus comes bipping along. And he says, Carl, it's either fishing or following me. Anthony, it's either fishing or following me. What's it going to be? What's it going to be, guys?
And you had a good day fishing.
And you had a good day of fishing. Seriously, good. Your best day of fishing. Hey, So what's it going to be, guys? Hey, Dr. Robertson, tell me, is this, now you both AME?
No, one AME, one back.
You're Baptist and you're AME? Is this typical of your students and their hesitancy to follow Jesus? That's the Baptist. He's going to make a deal here, right? It's not just straight out. Wherever you go, I will follow. No. Let's do a deal here, okay? Now, here's the interesting thing. You're feeling torn, aren't you? Making that, go back to the things that you love to do, like music and diving was another one, cooking, these things that you deeply, deeply love to do. And you think about, if Jesus come and said, it's either doing that or following me. You feel torn way down here, right? And you see, I think it's a false question. I think it's a false question. And what you're feeling is existentially torn. Because here's the deal. What Jesus said to the fishermen, Carl and Anthony, come follow me, and I will make you fishers of people. So when he's going to come to you on the pile and says, hey, now actually when you think about it, being on the pile, what is it about fishing that you really, really love, Carl? What's the essence of that?
The peace.
The peace?
To contemplate.
To contemplate. So peace and contemplation. How about for you, Anthony? What is it about fishing? You're out there on the boat fishing. What's that about?
Enjoy fellowship. Who I'm fishing with.
So you don't just go on your own. It's best when you're with a group of people. And what is it about when you catch a fish?
It's one of those things you can't explain. I mean, when you get that bite, and you don't know what you're catching, so you don't know what's going to do you that.
And for me, it's someone's gonna eat, because I'm usually doing it to bring fish back for a fish to take out, or a fish tail or something, or doing fish away from breakfast or something.
Now, it's going to be slightly different here, and it's going to be slightly different for each one of you, but here's what I'd suggest, Carl. What Jesus would say to you on that island. He says, come follow me. But we're going to fish for peace and contemplation. To feed other people with.
My Lord.
Come follow me, Carl. I wonder though, that miracle when you get the little bite, you don't know what it is, do you? It's kind of like grace. Wow. And what Jesus would say to Anthony, hey Anthony, come follow me. We're going to gather others together. And we're going to go fishing for grace.
My Lord.
Would you follow me? Here's the interesting thing. Notice, other people notice what I just said. I don't even know Ray. But just from the simple thing that he does, we know a whole bunch about you. And you think about, you want to follow Jesus to take people deeper to that place of serenity where they can see the wonder of God's creation? Follow me, Ray. Now you think, Ray, and think about your best experience in ministry. When you were just in your zone doing this ministry, right? I would hazard a guess. That's what you were doing. Taking somebody or a group of people deep to a place of serenity where they could behold the wonder of God's creation. Beautiful. Cool. So go back and think about it. What you love to do. And what's the essence of that? Ponder why you're on the face of the earth. And that doing this is what Jesus is calling you to do for the benefit of others. Now think about this in terms of your congregations. What would happen to your congregation if it stopped doing everything that it should do as a church and became a place to support people to do what they love to do for the benefit of the wider community? Would you like to be part of that church?
Yes.
Yeah. You can be.
Question. Is it possible when we talk about the things that we like to do, as you mature in life, those things change?
Now, good question. And your name again?
Rosalind.
Rosalind, yeah, we met last night. Rosalind. Here would be, the question is, over the course of our life, we often get new hobbies and interests and what have you. Here's what I would hazard a guess. While you may get a new hobby, the metaphor probably doesn't change. That the essence of what fascinates you probably doesn't change. And I'll go back and use myself. Well, actually, no. What do you love to do, Rosalind, today?
Today, going to spas.
Going to the spa. And when you go to the spa, what does that give you? What do you get?
A sense of freedom and peace and tranquility.
Freedom, peace, and tranquility. Okay? Just enter deeply into that experience. Which of those three, which is the one that really...
Tranquility.
Go into that place of tranquility. And what does that tranquility give you?
Stillness.
A stillness. What does the stillness give you?
Joy.
Joy. And what is the... So just take a moment and experience the joy. And what does that give you?
Value.
Value. And what does enter into that value? What does that give?
Freedom.
Freedom. So enter into the freedom. And what does that give you?
Creativity.
Creativity. Enter into the creativity. And what does that give you, Rosalind?
Jesus.
Jesus. So Jesus is the way for you to be creative, to bring freedom. And how long have you been following Jesus?
Pretty much all of my life. On and off.
On and off? Now, go back a few years and think about some of the things that you really loved to do back then. What things that you really loved to do back then?
Shop.
Shop. Cool, okay. Take a moment and remember a time when you were shopping. And what did that give you?
Excitement.
Excitement. So, let yourself experience that excitement. And what did that give you? Newness. And enter into that newness. And what does the newness give you?
I would say Jesus.
I'd say Jesus. Now, we could spend some more time unpacking this and connecting some of the dots, but here's what I'd be getting, Rosalind. Remember, how many people love to shop? Now, here's the interesting thing about shopping. Remember, what was it, Nathaniel? He said, come and see.
Yeah.
Right? And you're looking for this newness. This thing about shopping, and we could actually spend a whole bunch of time, actually, since many of you are expert shoppers. If you were to go shopping for a god, what kind of a god would you go looking for? See, I know what kind of god Rosalind would go shopping for. Someone who brings newness, someone who brings creativity, someone who brings freedom, joy. And what do we call that? Everyone, all together, what do we call? Newness, freedom, tranquility. Jesus. Now think about your best experience in ministry, Rosalind. My guess it was about newness, creativity, freedom. A few decades ago, now you're in Pasadena?
Los Angeles.
Los Angeles. You're in Los Angeles. A few decades ago, God was looking out over Los Angeles. And he's looking at all these people, he says, whoa, there is a ton of boredom down there. And these people frantically racing around all over the place, trying to get excited and trying to get all this kind of stuff, but they're bored. And they're looking for something. But don't worry, folks, I have a plan. And the plan is called Rosalind. To bring freedom, newness, creativity.
Yeah, God.
So here's what I'd be saying, and this is a skill that I really would seriously get you to practice and practice and practice. If I only have one question to ask people, what do you love to do? And you can drill down into that. And I think the handout that Dr. Roberson sent out, there's actually some protocols on how to do that, just like I was doing with Rosalind. If you need, sometimes we don't even need to go many steps down until we find something that is like the essence of you, why you're on the face of the earth, and this is your way of following Jesus. Here's where I'd suggest you do it. If you're doing a newcomer gathering, as the pastor of the congregation, you need to be there. You need to do a couple of things. Let other people organize it and that, but you've got to have two things you need to do as the leader. The first thing is to tell the newcomers what the mission and purpose of your church is. And invite people not to join your club, but to join your people who are on a mission to do something in the world. Right? Second thing you want to do is ask the people what they love to do. For a couple of reasons. Well, for a whole lot of reasons. One is they'll have a positive emotion. But there are some other reasons to do it. Because what you'd be inviting them to do is to come and do what they love to do to help you do your mission out in the world. And the next reason for asking them to do that, if you're a stranger, and when you're a newcomer, you are a stranger, right? Now, I actually happen to be a major introvert. One of the things that my mother taught me, and I've never gotten over this, I'm a really good boy when it comes to this, my mother told me never to talk to strangers. So I go to a place, I don't talk to anybody because they're all strangers. Right. and so, I'm an introvert. It feels really weird to go to a place and be strange and just, I really don't like that. You ask people, and you'll have people like that in your group, right? In the newcomer gathering, and so they won't know what to do. And so you can ask them, well, tell me, what do you love to do? Woodworking, fishing, cooking, scuba diving, travel. Photography. Let's just, I'm going to do it. I'll come back, remind me to come back to where I was, photography and travel. What is it about photography you love?
The capturing of a unique and a creative image in a place that is away.
Right. So it's a unique way of seeing. Now, do we have anybody else who loves to do photography? What else do we know about really good photographers? What do you have to pay attention to?
The image that they produce.
Not just the image. You got to pay attention to the light.
The light, yeah.
The next thing you got to do to create that unique image, you pay attention to the light. The next thing you have to do is what? Frame the image. think about what he does when he preaches. He focuses on the light, and you've got to frame this gospel for this group of people so that they can see the light.
Wow. Wow.
And it's all really about taking people on a journey with God, isn't it? Quit writing it. Just frame the goodness.
For the last 33 years of my life.
Just thank God I'm here today. Actually, I told you I love to glue big pieces of pipe together. And seriously, I was down in the trench digging a sewer for my house. I was building a big addition to my house, and I'm down in the trench, and I was gluing these pieces of pipe together, and 4-inch ABS pipe, and I'm pulling it into the pipe into the socket, and every time the pipe hit that sort of internal flange and you knew it was home, I would get this blast of satisfaction. Yeah! It's like, what? And I was going, because I do this work all the time. I'm going, what the heck is it about gluing big pieces of pipe together? And I discovered what it's about is getting things to fit. And this answers part of your question, Rosalind. I remember, even as a little boy, somebody made this sculpture and cost hundreds of thousands of dollars for a civic sculpture, and it was a big couple of round things with another thing. It was like a big bolt going through some stylized washers. And my dad looked at it and thought, what a waste of money. And it just fascinated the bejabbers out of me, because it was the way it fit together. And I can remember putting things together so that they fit. But a big part of what I do is I get people to, when I'm working with a big staff, my last parish we had a big staff, and what I was really interested in was getting the people to fit together so that the round pegs are in the round holes and the square pegs are in the square hole. Have you ever been a round peg in a square hole? It sucks. And it not only sucks for you, it sucks for everybody around you, right? The whole system ain't able to move and mesh and go in places or what have you. And so moving people to the right place where they fit. But it's also about getting you to fit in your life. You fit as a photographer who loves to travel. But there are other places, other things that you do where you just don't fit, right? And it's to fit inside of yourself that I'm really interested in. So this simple thing, gluing big pieces of pipe together. Why does it give me that blast of satisfaction? It's about helping people fit. So, now I did get myself distracted. Where was I going before that?
Well, you were going down the mission, the purpose, what do you like to do?
Well, I know what we're getting ready to do, which is why I was thinking about it, is when you're talking to the newcomers about what they love to do, you're inviting them to join and to share what they love to do, but also to think about how you can help people connect. So that, now for example, imagine I'd come in and asked you, now what do you really hate about the church? So we would have opened that drawer of things you hate, and there'd be a lot of things in there, right? We'd have put appreciative inquiry in that drawer, and I wouldn't really want that at all, because I want you to go looking for this in the place of things that you love. But here's what would happen at the first break. Everybody would be miserable and cranky. You hate that? Oh man, I hate that too. And it just really sucks to be in this church. Oh, no, this kind of stuff. Now, what we've done though, is given you some things to talk about that bring joy and passion and love to your life. And if there are people in this room you could go and talk to, stranger. Wow, you love photography. What kind of photography? Tell me about what, that stuff. Because that's what we're going to do now. My favorite class when I was in school was recess.
That was your song, by the way. I decided to follow Jesus. That was your song.
Okay, we're going to change tracks now. And what I want to look at, and this is kind of the appreciative way of understanding things, And what we're going to look at for the rest of the morning, and it's, I think on your schedule it says Q&A, but it's just kind of ask your questions as they come. But what I want to do is look at why people in the church love change. Okay, guys, now, here's what I know about people in the church. People in the church love change. And you laugh when I say that. Now, how many of your parishioners, when they come to church on Sunday, are looking to be blessed? They want to be blessed, right? But they get upset if they're not blessed, right? A blessing is a change. You come in one state and you leave in another state. You experience change. So people in the church love change. What they want is to be blessed. And so what we're going to look at is change as a blessing.
All right.
Or in fact, how we can ensure that any change we make will be perceived as a sustainable blessing. Many of you are studying leadership and what have you, and you look at change management theories. There's a lot of good stuff in that, but here's the thing. In the church, we need to get out of the business of change management and back into the blessing business.
Wow, man. Wow.
And what we're going to look at now is how to help people experience blessing and how we can create, as leaders, sustainable blessing for people. Okay? So, many years ago I worked at the College of Executive Coaching, and I was part of training executive coaches in the art of appreciative inquiry, and was incorporated into a lot of coaching. Now, we were sitting around with a group of potential coaches trying to define what coaching is, and mentoring and those kind of things. So when you think about coaching, if you were to hire a coach, what would you be looking for? What are some of the things people would be looking for?
Experience.
You want someone who's got experience, more experience maybe than you have in terms of what it is you're trying to accomplish, right?
Motivation.
Motivation. Now, motivation is a really interesting thing, because in our society, for a lot of people, motivation is getting a kick in the butt. Frankly, I am not interested in having my butt kicked, especially by a coach. Here would be the piece of it to think about in a slightly different way of motivate. How many of you have had the experience, you've got a committee or commission in your congregation and they're not working very well, and you say, oh, I'm going to go down and light a fire under these guys, right? Here's what will happen if you light a fire under people. You will get burnt butt. Not helpful. Here's what you want to do, is you've got to find the fire that's inside of them and fan it. And you've already learned how to find the fire in people earlier this morning, right? And we've got to figure that out.
Is finding what makes people happy, finding what gives them joy.
I would go even beyond that. I would say that at the heart of appreciative inquiry is finding what is life-giving. Not just, happy is part of it, but something even way more profound.
So life-giving, but happiness is kind of a symptom of...
Yeah, it's a fruit. It's a fruit of doing something that's life-giving.
What do you do with people who don't know what makes them happy? Because we all started today with kind of wrestling and kind of going to what made us happy. But we often lead people, and even ourselves, we become workaholics. We lead people who are oppressed, or who deal with internalized marginalization. In that their lifestyle put them on a hamster wheel. So much so that they got to do in order to survive, that you lose the ability to play, to have these life-giving, happy moments. And so you can almost forget them.
So how do you create?
Well, okay, and that's why we need community, where we can invite people in to be part of something where they don't have to. So we can get them out of that and to begin to ponder with them what it is they love to do. And when I think about what it is they love to do, yeah, happy, I do get a sense of happiness, but even more than something that's beyond emotion, to that place of deep satisfaction.
Yes, yes.
That's what I'm looking for. And granted, there are people in our society who are so oppressed to survive that they've lost sight. And yet I would also say that which they've lost sight of is probably the solution to their survival. And what we do is we struggle and like I think, go back to the minister who was struggling to write her sermons, but she knew how to quote them. So we need to, a big piece of what I'd be looking at is how can we engage people at their place of resourcefulness. And often what we're doing is engaging people at their place of weakness. Now here's the other thing that happens, and this happens a lot in the church, and I think particularly as we in society are going through some enormous cultural shifts. And many of us have churches that are older congregations, the young people are gone and all of those kinds of things. And many clergy think, well, the solution to this is I need to work harder and be more faithful. But here's the deal. If you work harder and are more faithful to what's not working, you'll get dead quicker. And I can think of some people I know I can think of one priest in particular who is the most faithful, loyal. In terms of his faithfulness as a priest, he puts me to shame. But the sad reality is he is being faithful to what's not working anymore. And so I think we need ways to reinvent church. Yes. And I would say the big way to reinvent church is simply to go back and discover what do you love to do, sir?
Yes.
Work out.
Work out.
Website design.
What is it about website design that you really love?
Presenting information in a way people can digest.
And you see, that's what I'd be thinking about. If you persist in doing what's not working, we've got to find ways to present information in a way in which it can be received, right? And that's the big part of, I've been doing websites since 1995 or something. And what I know worked back then don't work today, in terms of, so it's how do we, the message hasn't changed, but the way we present it. So I'd be pondering that. We'll look at some of that possibly on Thursday. We're also going to look particularly, actually tomorrow we'll look particularly at people who have what I would call sort of the victim consciousness.
Oh, yeah.
We'll look at that tomorrow. I want to come back though to thinking about how we create change, and going back to this idea of coaching, right? We've got being a mentor, being someone who would motivate, find the fire, inspire, experience.
Maybe energy.
Energy. Well, and here would be the question, that what the coach has to do though is find the energy inside of the person, because if the coach gives you the energy, as soon as the coach goes away, you're going to be a blob on the ground again. So that has to be internal.
Be able to give or teach instructions that would be taken.
So there's instruction, there's something to learn from this person. Okay, so you got a whole bunch of ideas. Well, I was with this group, and we were trying to define what coaching is, and it was kind of like a church trying to write a mission statement. Everybody had their pet clause that they needed put in, right? So it was getting longer and longer and longer, more and more long-winded. I said, this is crazy. So I went to Webster's dictionary, looked up the word coach. You know what it says? means of transportation. Coach is just the means to get from A to B. In fact, I flew coach to Dayton, Ohio. So it's simple. Coach or change is simply getting from A to B. So this is our basic model. We're at A. We're going to get over here to B. What's between A and B? Are resources. This is the appreciative way of creating change as a sustainable blessing. It's just about getting from A to B, and the way we do that is we gather resources and apply the resource. So I applied the resource of money to the airline. I was in Portland. They get me to Dayton. Okay? So resources are anything you need to get from one place to another, or one state to another state. Now, sometimes it can be material, sometimes it can be property, physical stuff, money, buildings, location, all those kinds of things. But a lot of the resources that people need are things like motivation, information. I would say one of the biggest resources that people in congregations need today, the first resource that many congregations need to get is a goal, or to have a mission. That many of our churches are functioning as, I would call them as religious clubs that have lost sight of mission. And that the first mission is to get a mission. But that would be a resource. Anything you need to get from A to B, inspiration, motivation, all of those kinds of things would also be resources. Right? Skills are another resource that people may need. So, can be tangible or intangible. But here's some basic rules, if you like, about getting from A to B. First thing, in order to help someone make a change, you got to know what A is, where they're starting from. I didn't pay attention yesterday. What's the freeway you have to come to get to Payne Seminary? 675. The 605? 675. Okay. Now, does the 675 go north-south or east-west? North-south. It goes north-south. So I'm figuring to get here, you have to come south on the 675. Is that right?
Depends on which direction you're coming from.
What, some of you come north on the 675? Huh?
From the airport?
It depends. So where did you come from? They come from the airport. Did anyone drive to get here?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so where did you come from? You came from Akron, Ohio, and so which way did you? So you came south on the 675. South on 71. Did anyone come north on 71? Now, the point of going around, so you live in Akron, Ohio. And your name again? Bruce. Now, here's the thing. In order to give Bruce directions from Akron, Ohio to Payne Seminary, all I need to know is where he's starting from, right? Right. Here's what I don't need to know about Bruce. I do not need to know how long he has lived in Akron, Ohio. I do not need to know how he got to Akron, Ohio. I do not need to know how living in Akron, Ohio has messed up his life. I did not need to know who in Akron, Ohio is messing up in his life or what have you. Right? All I need to know is where he is.
All right.
Okay, all I need to know is what? Where is he? As soon as I know he's there, I can give him directions to get here. Now that may seem really ridiculous, but here's the interesting thing. We live in a society that's obsessed with why people are at A. And who's to blame for them being at A. If you want to get really smart, smartest thing you can do is take the word why out of your lexicon. I'll tell you where you can put it back in and how to use it, but most of the time, YA is an absolute waste of time. Now here's the other thing that's really crazy in our society. We have experts running around giving you eloquent descriptions of A, masquerading as solutions. And we get these big, huge reports, hundreds of pages, and they're eloquent descriptions of A. Or we'll even get therapists to come along and help you paint A and make it more creative and rewarding and enriching. And I think, for example, of a lot of therapy from my experience is my metaphor, it's like I'm living in a prison. And so the therapist comes in and we explore the prison. We paint the prison walls. We get Michelangelo to come in and do the ceiling of the prison wall, and we make it very comfortable. And we feel okay in our prison. But we're still in a prison. And I'm interested in setting the prisoners free. I am not interested in messing with the prison.
That's right. He's right.
So I would be very cautious around eloquent descriptions of the prison. Who built it? How big is it? How thick are the walls? I am interested. Our job is to set the prisoners free. So, we don't need to spend a lot of time. That's why I say put one foot in A, and the next thing we need to do is put the next foot in B. Okay? Where do you want to go? What's your desired outcome? What's your preferred future? That's what I want to pay a lot of attention to. Excuse me. Okay, I have a little exercise for you to do. How many of you have heard the expression to be a non-anxious presence? Is that common in circles? Okay, how many of you as a pastor, as a minister, would like to be a non-anxious presence? You know, you go into anxious settings and you like to be a non-anxious presence. Getting a few head nods. Yeah. That's real. In the Episcopal Church a few years back, this was the big buzzword. Be a non-anxious presence. Okay, so in order to achieve any kind of goal, first thing you need to know is where you're starting from, and then get a picture in your mind. In fact, actually, you need to be able to imagine your desired outcome. If you've ever preached a sermon and someone has said at the end of it, I can't imagine doing what you said, I can't imagine forgiving my mother. Literally what they're telling you is, I have no picture in my head of me doing that. So the first step to achieving a goal is actually to create a picture. Or if your goal was maybe to sing music, it may be to hear some music. But you've got to get an image, visually or acoustically, inside your mind of you doing it. Or when people say, I can't see myself doing it, that's all. I don't have a picture in my head of me doing that. So you've got to get, so first thing, get a picture of you being anxious. Since we're going to be a non-anxious presence, I want you to get a picture in your mind of you being anxious. That's just, don't matter why you're anxious, just get a picture. That's the starting place, right? So you all got a picture of being anxious? Okay, now, just set that aside and get a picture of you being non-anxious. Okay, now, you got two pictures, right? I want you to look at them simultaneously. A picture of you being anxious, a picture of you being non-anxious. I want you to look at both pictures, and as you look at them, to tell me which picture feels real. So which of those two pictures feels real? The anxious picture or the non-anxious picture? How many would say the anxious picture somehow feels real compared to the other? You got a few hands. How many of you would say the non-anxious picture feels real? Oh, we'll deal with you guys later. Okay, let's go back to the other one. Those of you who have got the anxious picture feels real, right? I want you to think about this. If you're not being anxious, what would you actually be? Tranquil, calm, peaceful. What's your word? My word actually would be assured. Sort of confident or assured. But figure out what your word is. What would you be if you weren't peaceful? Serene. Okay, so now I want you to create 3 pictures in your mind. Anxious, peaceful, calm, surreal, serene, whatever that word is, assured, and then non-anxious. We actually do it in this order. Anxious, non-anxious, calm, peaceful, serene, assured, confident, whatever your word is, tranquil. So you've got 3 pictures. Now I want you to look at those 3 pictures in your mind and tell me which pictures feel real. So which of the 3 pictures feels real? For you, the non-anxious one. We will come back to you in a minute.
My word would be confidence. That feels more real than the other two.
How many of you would say the anxious picture and the third picture, the calm, confident, assured, peaceful, serene, those 2 pictures feel real, but the middle picture doesn't feel real? Anyone having that experience? That something about that picture just doesn't make sense. Because, and your name, ma'am? Susan. Here's what I'm guessing. Actually, even better. The picture that you're saying is real is actually a picture of you being confident or peaceful or calm. You've just labeled it non-anxious. Now, here's the interesting thing about this. Some people can do that. They can make a picture of peaceful, calm, or what have you, and they can give it the label non-anxious. But many of us can't. And the reason we can't is because it's actually impossible to create in consciousness a negation. Yeah. For the next 2 minutes, please, no one, I don't want anyone in this room to think of a purple elephant. I don't want any of you to even imagine what a purple elephant would look like. I told you not to, ma'am! And while you're not thinking of a purple elephant, do not even think of what a polka dot elephant would look like. Yeah, a purple polka. Don't think about that, Bruce. I told you, don't think about it. It's actually impossible to create in consciousness a negation. And if you were to look at the quality of those 3 pictures in consciousness, you'd actually find that for many of you, that middle picture is kind of murky, whereas the other pictures are clear and different characteristics. But the reality is, you cannot create in consciousness a negation. It's impossible neurologically or mentally to be able to create in consciousness a negation. Or if you were ever into higher math, it's an abstraction. And here's the reality is that an abstraction will never motivate anyone to change. So if you want people to change, if you want people in your congregation to change, the first thing you have to do is create in consciousness a picture of them doing what it is you want them to do. And this is where we get into a whole bunch of trouble in the church, because what do we spend all of our time doing? Telling people what not to do. Now, brothers and sisters, Lent's coming up, and we're going to talk about the 10 Commandments during Lent. And we get down there and we say, thou shalt not commit adultery. Now, brothers and sisters, I don't want any of you committing adultery, because you know, don't you? You know that adultery causes families to break up, and it's really bad in church. I don't want any of you doing this adultery thing. What picture do you have in your mind? Adultery. You've just painted a picture in my mind of what I shouldn't do. And if you're this high, you've got to run home and look in the dictionary to figure out what it is. Think about adultery. What's the opposite of that? What does adultery mean? It means to dilute, to weaken, pollute. Okay, so we look at the opposite. So I want strengthen, faithful, right? So think about it. Go back and think about the person that you love that we talked about before, right? Think about one thing you could do to strengthen that relationship. What's one thing, simple thing you could do to strengthen that relationship? In my case, one of the things that I could do to strengthen my relationship, my beloved Kim, take out the trash. Now, I grew up, you know what I'm talking about, don't you? Now, here's the deal. I grew up on a farm in New Zealand. We never had trash. A trash service. We never had a trash can that needed taking out. We burned our trash and we just basically took care of it. So the idea that every Thursday night I got to put the trash, that's an abstraction to me. That's not something that just fits in my consciousness. So I have to really consciously remember. And that's, for me, that's not easy. But that would be one thing. So you can think about the people you love, and what's one thing that you could do to strengthen that relationship? Now, there are thousands of things that you could be thinking of, right? Some of them are really simple. Wouldn't you want your parishioners leaving the church thinking about one thing they could do to strengthen relationship with the people they love than running out into the world with pictures of adultery in their mind? So here's the first rule of goals. The first rule of goals is that goals must be positively stated.
You're saying goals, right? G-O-A-L-S?
Yeah, G-O-A-L. So B must be positively stated. Now, a lot of people say, the thing I love about appreciative inquiry is it's so positive. At that point, I'm not too interested in whether appreciative inquiry is positive or negative, because that's really just a personal value statement. What you think's positive, I might not, and what have you. This is the one time I do get cranky crazy about positive. And it's almost like in a mathematical sense. Your goals must be positively stated. So some of you have been learning in part of composing your dissertation and what have you. What's the problem? What's the solution? First thing, check your solution. Is it a negation or is it actually a positive thing? Do you need to reframe your solution? That would be one of the first things I'd be wanting to look at. Here's some questions for you. Is there a problem in the world with too much conflict between Palestinians and Israelis? Is there a problem in the United States with too much conflict between Republicans and Democrats? Is there a problem in the United States of too much racism? What do you reckon? Would you say yes to all three of those?
Yes.
I would say no to all three of those. Here's why. I don't think the problem in Palestine and Israel is that there's too much conflict. I would say the real problem is there's not enough collaboration between Palestinians and Israelis for the benefit of the people who live in that Palestinian area. Is there a problem in the United States with too much conflict between Republicans and Democrats? Hell no. The problem is there's not enough collaboration
right.
between those two groups of people for the benefit of you and I and actually the whole world.
That's right. That's right.
And is there a problem in the United States with too much racism? Or is the real problem is there's not enough cross-cultural collaboration?
That's right. That's right.
Now we can be working on collaboration,
Yes.
but I don't think we'll ever stop racism
That's right.
or war. So what we've got to do is make sure that solution, that goal, that place that we are going to is positively stated. What is, and so this is the, yes sir?
But how do you deal with the collaboration if the one who's oppressed and controlled the ability to collaborate?
You got it.
So the question is, what do you do if the one that you need to collaborate with won't collaborate? So what have you tried so far?
What has he tried, or what has the folk have tried for 400 years or 500 years?
Here's what I would suggest. Killing people don't work. I would actually suggest what we need to do is find the one or two people who will collaborate. And go seriously work with them. And I do think there are enough people in this country, if we can go ask the right questions and find the right people, where we could collaborate. And that if you go back to even thinking about Jesus, what did he keep rabbiting on about? In the first three Gospels in particular. What was it? He couldn't leave it alone.
Kingdom of God, kingdom of heaven.
Kingdom of God, kingdom of heaven, kingdom of God, kingdom of heaven. What was the reality of the people?
Rome's oppression.
The kingdom of Rome. How many sermons did we hear him preach about the kingdom of Rome? He just told us, don't be like them. I would want to be looking at, and there's some more things that we need to do here. We need to paint a picture of being where we want to go, and then go find the people who want to go there. And start building our collaboration around it. Things seems to be working with those people to create a collaboration. And we will come back to that in a little bit. But the piece that I want to come back to is make sure that we are heading toward a positively framed goal. And that was my big problem. I was miserable, so I wanted to be less miserable. How's this? That work better? Okay. So some of the other things. So I mentioned blessing, right? What is a blessing? A blessing is any outcome B that must be greater than the value of A, plus the cost of the resources to get there. Many of you have had, yeah, I'd like to do that, but it's just not worth the hassle. It's not worth the resource of energy and time and those kinds of things, right? So that's what a blessing is. So here's the next thing we need to figure out when people give us a goal is, why would that be valuable? First thing that I typically ask people when I'm working with and consulting with them is, what would a successful outcome for our time be? I want to know what a successful outcome is. And I will do that particularly if I go into a situation that's highly conflicted. Now typically when people are highly conflicted, they say, well, what's the problem? We've got to figure out what the problem is. And if you go down the what's the problem, you'll go into the area of blame and alienation and judgment and a whole bunch, and you'll have people yelling and screaming and hollering at each other, and it just gets worse. You go into a room that's conflicted, and the first question you ask them is, tell me, say to them, we have 2 hours together tonight and I'm curious what a successful outcome for our time would be. Paint me a picture of success, and we're going to work toward that. And again, often you'll find that the success, and sometimes, well, we've got all this conflict. Okay, you've got all this conflict. If you didn't have this conflict, what would you be doing? Well, we'd be feeding the poor, or we'd be doing something else. Okay, let's start work on feeding the poor. But everyone wants to get this eloquent description of the problem and the conflict and who's been firing what kind of arrows at the other people and all this kind of stuff, and it just doesn't get us anywhere. Yes, sir.
I'm sure you've covered this already, but back to Mr. Beelan's question, Reverend Beelan's question. Can you speak to the limitations of this approach? Because it feels like a very existential framework, but there are some physical power dynamics, such as South Africa, apartheid, such as America, as he mentioned. So what are the limitations of this approach?
Here's what I would say. I don't think there's any limitation. Well, let me ask you a different question. What's the limitation to the gospel? Are there any places that you would go where you would not preach the gospel because it just won't work?
Well, what is the gospel?
The good news of Jesus Christ.
And the kingdom of God and the kingdom of heaven.
Right? Now, but the point, we can dig down and we can spend a lot of time. Here's the thing. I think the appreciative way is a way of looking at the world. And now, there are, which is not to be confused simply with doing an appreciative inquiry. In all situations, would I do an appreciative inquiry? And that's where you interview people and you do a whole bunch of stuff, which we haven't really covered, but as of yet. But what I'd be looking at, yes, there are lots of places I would not do an appreciative inquiry, but I would go into every situation, and I cannot think of a limitation where I would not go into and think of this appreciatively, just as I would not go into any situation and think, okay, what are the gospel implications here?
So to push back a little bit, how does a slave do appreciative inquiry with a slave master?
Say that again.
How does a slave do appreciative inquiry with the slave master? Or if you want a contemporary, how does someone who's about to get shot by a police officer who doesn't have a weapon do appreciative inquiry with the police officer while he's getting beaten on the ground?
I don't think he can.
Right. So that's what I'm asking.
Okay, so here's what I would say. He's not going to do an appreciative inquiry with the police officer, but here's what I would suggest. To think appreciatively in that moment, and I'm not 100% sure, but I think it would be to roll up in a ball and do nothing. I mean, what's the alternative? Are you going to run and that will guarantee you're going to get shot? Or you've got to do something that's going to increase the probability of survival. Because at that point, you're talking purely, well, at that point, what's the gospel solution to the person who's about to be shot?
Well, for Stephen, it was heaven. When he got stoned.
So I think part of the issue here is thinking about what to do, but even so, I would think about it from the perspective of what is an appreciative response, or what's the thing that's going to do that's going to maximize my opportunity to survive. Because we're talking at that point we're talking life and death, right? And you can have any kind of theory, a problem-solving approach, an appreciative inquiry-solving approach. I don't think anything is going to simply guarantee success in that. However, I do think if we can create a safe place that we can get cops and citizens sitting down together, that we can begin to share some stories, which appreciative inquiry is really big on, to create a new reality.
So that's a limitation. One has to be willing to sit down together on an equal playing field and listen to each other.
Right. Now, if they're not prepared to do that, then I would suggest at that point you're going to have to stay away. To the extent, again, that you can. I mean, and I would say at that point, one of the solutions, and we'll look at that, we're going to look at this tomorrow, we would be looking at Jesus' fierce silence before Pilate. We haven't talked about fierceness and what that all means. But I do realize, for many of you in this room, this is life and death. Right. And having a nice big paradigm up here, in the instant when it's life and death, ain't going to do much of anything. However, what I'm really interested in is take it out of the life and death situation to a situation where what's the best strategy to create a new community? Because we really do need to create a totally different culture and community in many places. And so the question would be, how are we going to create a new community? And going back to your example of the cop with the gun, the new community is not going to be created by getting the cop to stop shooting people. If we focus on getting him to stop, that's a negative goal. What we need to do is get people, create a community where respect is the core value. Think about, go back though, how do you gain respect? Well, there are 4 things I think that you need in order to be respected, to feel respected. The first thing is you need to be seen. Now, have you ever been in a place where you are not seen?
I think Ralph Ellison did a good job of explaining that.
I'm not familiar with
Invisible Man.
And I know in one of the African nations, their greeting when they say hello in their language is, I see you. I recognize your existence. So the first thing you need in order to respect is to be seen. Second thing is you need to be heard. Everybody has a story that needs to be told, right? So for example, have you ever been to a place, or have you heard the expression, we don't know his people? You know, sort of like the stranger comes to town and it's like, we don't know his story, we don't know who he is, we don't know his people. That's the story. So you have a story, you need to be heard. The third thing you need in order to feel respected is everybody has a gift that they need to contribute to the well-being of the community. And if your gift, and I would go back to some of those things about our core passion, what we're here for, if that is somehow not accepted by the group, you will not feel respect and acceptance. If you're not allowed to contribute to the well-being of the community, you will not feel accepted and respected by that community. Okay?
I understand what you're talking about, feeling anxious. I'm feeling anxious.
You're feeling anxious? Okay.
I see it.
Let me come back to the fourth one in terms of respect. The last part of respect is each one of you has a dream. Each one of you has a dream that needs to be blessed by the community in order for you to feel respect. Women in the room, can you remember a time when your congregate or your communities did not ordain women? I know in the Episcopal Church, for example, there are a lot of women who we weren't ordaining women, and yet they felt a call to the ministry. They had a dream of being a priest, and in that moment they did not feel the respect of their community. They did not feel accepted. So I would be looking at, and if we're going to create a new community, those are the 4 things we need to pay attention to. How do we behaviorally operationalize seeing people, hearing people, helping them contribute and listening to their dream? And that is where I would use appreciative inquiry to create that new community. But in the instance you're referring to, I think it's just pure survival.
Like the Aborigines in Australia?
Same way.
Aborigines in Australia, people that were there before the Europeans came. They felt invisible, I suspect.
They certainly were treated that way. Same, I come from New Zealand and the Maori were there and certainly were treated that way. You said you felt anxious.
I'm good.
I know you're good, but I'm wondering about that. What would you need in order to feel peaceful?
Respect. For my people to be respected.
Your people
I
to
mean, I kind of think that your answer, for me, maybe I'm wrong, but the answer came more on the end of what the victim needs to do in order to survive. And there was no accountability on the other hand, where the one that had the authority and the power, there was nothing there for that.
So the question is, how do we deal with the authority? Is that the question?
No, how does authority take responsibility for their violence?
How to transform the authority.
Well, here's the dilemma. The miserable reality, the only thing I can change is myself. I can't change the authority. Now, I can work in spite of the authority, and sometimes when I will do that in spite of the authority might change, but I cannot give you any. We will look at some strategies tomorrow, but I cannot give you any strategy that will guarantee the authority will change. That is one of the harsh, crappy realities that human existence. The only person I know how to create change is myself. I'm not even that good at changing myself. You've got a hand up, ma'am.
No, I was just going to say a quote I came across when we just came out of a celebration, and it might be appropriate here, it may not be appropriate here. But Dr. King said that I cannot force a man to love me or respect me, but I can work for a law that keeps him from hanging me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it.
What do you...
In essence, he says, I can't force you to love me.
Right.
But I can work for a law that keeps you from hanging.
And here's where we are. We've got the law to some extent. Now we need to change the hearts, right? Because the hearts haven't caught up with the law. And here would be the other thing, that this is in terms of getting other people to change, how many of you know someone who has changed in the direction you want them to change because you hated them? All I know is my hatred breeds more hatred, and it doesn't create change. And that's, again, I would go back, that's not the gospel.
Sir?
This lady over here, then come back to here, and then here.
Oh, no, I'm good. I'm good.
We have someone right here.
Okay.
There is a philosophy that says that we have to be the change that we want to see in others, because what's in others is also in us. And if we change what's in us first, then it will change the situation. And I think one of the concepts of quantum physics that deals with energy says that like energy attracts like. And so if the energy that we're sending out is the right kind of energy, it will help to right the situation that we're facing.
And that's the whole thing, that hate will breed hate. And being the change we want to see. You had another?
In the last plenary we had, some of you may remember, Dr. Freddie Haynes was talking about what you're talking about, but I think he had a different sensitivity when he talked about this sort of appreciative inquiry where the person with power is standing in a chair and bending over to collaborate with the person who's on the floor.
Right.
And Dr. Freddie Haynes mentioned in our last plenary that the way this would have to work is that person would have to come off the chair and be on a level playing field. And so I was kind of putting up the straw man to suggest that the limitation of this is that the person in power, if it's the pastor or bishop, they would have to come on equal level to create that democratic space so we could do appreciative inquiry. So I think that's a limitation. I think that's what Beelan was suggesting, that there are some limitations in the power dynamics.
Oh, and tomorrow we will look at those power dynamics. Here's the thing though, if someone is up here, and so everyone has to look up to them, here's the one thing you can do. Don't look up. I mean, I think that was the whole point of part of what, I mean, it's kind of like if this person is higher than you, well, or put it this way, if you look up to anybody, they will have to look down on you. And what is the whole thing about, again, I come back to this gospel thing, and at some point, this is a little off track, but one of the things that, my current mission in the world at the moment is to teach people how to forgive. The biggest thing though, the biggest resistance to forgiveness is that people equate forgiveness with reconciliation. Forgiveness is how I personally deal with injury in my past. Reconciliation is an agreement between two or more people in the future about how they will be together in the future. It's looking in two different directions. And Rob's rule of reconciliation, never ever be reconciled to someone who does not share your values. Jesus forgave the Romans, but he was never reconciled to the mission of Rome. Jesus forgave the scribes and the Pharisees, but he was never reconciled to their mission. And it is, if you're teaching about forgiveness and reconciliation, help people make that distinction, because most people confuse forgiveness, and so they carry the resentment around, thinking that they need to be reconciled. You mean I've got to go back and live with this person who's beating them up? It's like, no. And so part of it, coming back to how do we create those communities, I would say one of the things that we have to do is explore what are our core values. And at some point have some conversation and then begin to dream together how we can create a community where those values will be manifested. And I would say that in South Africa, it was truth and reconciliation. It wasn't denial and reconciliation. And it wasn't truth and punishment. And so we need to be creating a place where it's safe for people to be able to come together to tell the truth, to explore what their shared values are, and then how they can live into those. Those are the... I want to come back to getting to A to B, because that often will be the big, what are we going to do? In some cases, here's an example to illustrate. You know the statement, there's an elephant in the room?
Yeah, big elephant.
And it's possibly there is an elephant in this room right now, I don't know. But here's the thing about the elephant. If you force people to talk about the elephant, you know what's going to happen? You'll end up with more elephant manure. If there's an elephant in the room and you know it in your congregation, here's the thing you need to do is say, okay, folks, we need to stop, back up, and ask ourselves the question, what do we need to do to make it safe enough to have this conversation? And to build a community that's safe and respectful so that we can have that conversation. And if you felt disrespected by what I said, I do apologize. That certainly not my intention. And I am aware, for all of you, that you live in a world that's life and death that I don't live in. And that pisses me off. And I would like to figure out a way to collaborate with you to create a world where your children are free to walk to school. And in fact, that's a big part of my personal motivation for actually being here when I was talking to Dr. Robertson. I do not like the world we live in.
Thank you.
And even more so, I don't like the world many of your children get to live in. And if we can figure a way to do something about that together, that would warm my heart.
Everybody said amen.
Amen. Thank
We
you.
will have a chance to hear more from you, which is verse 4 tomorrow morning, beginning at 9 o'clock. Dr. Holly has kindly agreed to make an announcement, and then we'll move to lunch. We hate stopping at this point, but we know we...
Yep. We got a schedule to keep.
Maybe just one more time, send our love to Dr.
I just wanted to say, Dr. Voyle, I appreciate your lecture and your lessons that you had for us today. I want to also apologize because when I walked in, you reminded me of a professor that was mean, nasty, and hateful. And so it took me a minute to be able to listen to you. In the climate in which we live in today, it took me 10 more minutes to be able to listen to you. But I appreciate your vulnerability to own what you know that many of us have experienced, not necessarily by your own living it, but just your seeing it. So I appreciate you for that, and I look forward to everything else that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Amen. Amen.